My daughter labeled my wife a blatant downgrade from her dead mother at our anniversary party. My wife revoked her college funding the next day, and my daughter has blocked me on everything since. My name's Kyle, I'm 42. I run a small tile and flooring business, residential, a bit of commercial. It's been my life for about 8 years. Not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Lately, though, things have been tight. Not failing, just tight enough that cash flow was always on my mind. I'd been putting off some bigger expenses, trying to make ends meet. Nina and I have been together for almost 5 years, married for 2. She's 39, an office manager for a dental group. She's steady, organized, the kind of person who remembers a casual comment you made 6 months ago and then quietly takes care of it, no fanfare. She's the most competent, thoughtful person I've ever been with, and I mean that in the best possible way. Then there's my daughter, Brooke. She's 18 now, about to start college. Her mom and I divorced when Brooke was 10. It wasn't some huge blow-up. We just drifted apart. No ugliness, just a slow realization that we'd become polite roommates. We split amicably, co-parented fine. Brooke took it hard, but kids do. Then, 8 months after Nina and I started dating, Brooke's mom passed away suddenly. An aneurysm in her sleep. No warning. Brooke was 15. That changed everything. All the processing Brooke had done around our divorce got buried under raw grief overnight. And I think, deep down, the divorce became something different for her after that. More final, more unfair. Before, her mom was still there. After, she was gone. Brooke moved in with me full-time and Nina. Nina knew all of it. Nina never tried to replace Brooke's mom. She was so careful, so self-aware, knowing she needed to let Brooke set the pace. So, she just showed up. She learned Brooke's favorite foods, made meals without announcing them as a gesture. She remembered little things Brooke mentioned, a TV show, a shop she wanted to check out, and brought them up later, naturally. When I'd come home late, I'd often find Nina and Brooke just talking, Nina genuinely listening. I remember one time, about a year into our relationship, Brooke mentioned offhand how much she loved a specific soup her grandmother used to make. Just a passing comment. 3 weeks later, Nina made it from scratch, completely unprompted. She'd looked up the regional recipe, everything. Brooke just said thanks and went back to her phone. Nina just nodded and cleaned up. That was our dynamic for 5 years. Brooke was never openly rude. She didn't yell or say cruel things to Nina's face. She was just closed off. Kept Nina at arm's length. Short answers, avoided one-on-one time whenever she could. She made it clear, not aggressively, but consistently, that there was a ceiling on how close they'd ever be. And she wasn't raising it for anyone. I kept telling myself it was grief. I told myself Brooke needed time, that things would eventually click. I didn't step in. Didn't push Brooke to be warmer. Never directly told her that Nina deserved more than the bare minimum of civility. I just kept waiting for things to naturally fix themselves. And I kept choosing that over and over, without ever admitting what I was doing. Honestly, I didn't want to deal with the fallout. Every time I imagined having that conversation with Brooke, the one where I told her her behavior wasn't okay, I could already picture it. She'd shut down, feel like I was choosing Nina over her, pull away from me. I was still rebuilding our relationship after her mom passed, so I kept postponing it. 5 years. That's how long I made the same non-decision, pretending it didn't count. 5 years of Nina trying, and me quietly letting it not work. Then came our second anniversary. We decided to celebrate with a dinner party at our house. Close family, a few good friends, maybe 22 people total. Nina, of course, handled most of the planning, which meant everything was perfectly organized. Good food, relaxed atmosphere, genuinely warm energy all evening. I was happy. A few days before, Brooke had seemed almost upbeat, more communicative than usual at dinner, even asking Nina a few questions about the party setup. I remember thinking it was a good sign. Looking back, I was seeing what I desperately wanted to see. Brooke was home for the summer before college. There's one crucial thing I need to explain. About 2 months before the party, I'd had a tough conversation with Nina about Brooke's college tuition. My business was going through a slow patch, and covering a full year of tuition right then would have really squeezed us. I told Nina what was going on. Without a moment's hesitation, she offered to cover Brooke's first year, no conditions. She even offered to co-sign a student loan. The point is, Nina was Brooke's ticket to college this year. And Brooke had no idea. I hadn't told her yet. I kept putting it off. It felt like a weird conversation to start. Another mistake I made. Anyway, about halfway through the anniversary party, Brooke stood up. She said she wanted to make a toast. I felt this cautious optimism. She'd never done anything like this before. Never publicly acknowledged Nina or our relationship. I thought, okay, maybe this is finally it. Maybe she's grown up enough. Nina caught my eye from across the table. I could tell she was thinking the same thing. For about 30 seconds, I let myself believe something good was coming. Brooke started well. Congratulated us, talked about how relationships take effort. Then she said how surprised she was that I had been willing to keep trying through disagreements and rough patches. A little backhanded, but I let it go. Then it turned. She started talking about her parents' marriage, how her mom and I used to argue. She said she'd always believed that if I'd actually tried, I could have saved that marriage. That I never gave her mom the same level of effort I apparently gave Nina. I could feel the room shifting. My dad put his fork down. Nina's mom stopped mid-sip. I tried to catch Brooke's eye, to signal her to stop. She wasn't looking at me. She went on, saying she didn't understand how I chose to marry Nina after her mom. Because by her assessment, and she said this, out loud, to a room full of people who knew all of us, Nina was an obvious downgrade. Not just in appearance, but in intelligence, too. She couldn't figure out what I saw in her. And then, the absolute gut punch. She turned and addressed Nina directly. She told her she should count herself lucky her mom wasn't around anymore, because if she were, Nina wouldn't have stood a chance. Then she set her glass down and walked upstairs to her room. The table went completely quiet. Nina wasn't crying. She was just still. That particular kind of still where someone is so blindsided, their body hasn't caught up yet. I went to her immediately, grabbed her hand, told her quietly, "This isn't okay. I'm going to handle it." She just nodded, said nothing. People started finding polite ways to leave. Quick goodbyes. The whole hurried exit. I don't blame any of them. No one knew what to do. I stayed close to Nina for the rest of the evening. She was quiet the entire time, not processing out loud, not asking what I was going to do. She just sat with it. She even helped clear a few plates, like it was a normal end to a normal night. I kept watching her for a sign of what she needed, and she wasn't giving me anything. After the last guest left, she said she was going to bed, and she said it the way you say it when you mean you've reached your absolute limit, and you need everything to stop. I sat in the kitchen alone for probably an hour. Didn't turn on the TV. Didn't look at my phone. Just sat there. I kept replaying the toast. Every sentence. The way Brooke's voice had been totally steady, like she'd rehearsed it. The part where she turned and addressed Nina directly. The specific word, downgrade, and how flat it landed. It was calculated. It wasn't some spontaneous outburst of grief. I went upstairs and told Brooke she was leaving for her grandparents' house first thing in the morning. She pushed back more than I expected. She actually said she wanted to stay and confront Nina the next day. I still can't fully process that, because she was the one who'd done something so wrong. I told her that wasn't happening. I made the calls that night while she slept, packed a bag for her, and had her gone before Nina was even up. Nina never got a chance to say anything to her face. I'm still not sure if that was the right call, but I didn't want more damage done before anyone had cooled off. The next couple of days between Nina and me were rough, but in that quiet, strained way that's almost harder than a screaming fight. She wasn't demanding anything from me. Wasn't asking me to cut off my daughter. Wasn't giving ultimatums. None of the things I might have braced for. She was just sitting with it, working through what had happened in her own way, privately. And I was trying to figure out what I could possibly say that wouldn't sound completely hollow. I went to work both days and got basically nothing done. Kept going over the same calculation. Was this fixable? Did I even want it to be fixable in a way that would truly repair it, with Brooke genuinely understanding and apologizing? Or was I just hoping the tension would magically dissipate like I'd been hoping for 5 years? I kept running into the same answer, and I didn't like it. I kept checking in on Nina. She'd say she was okay, and I could tell she meant it. She wasn't falling apart. But something had shifted in her. She was more contained, like she was recalibrating internally and didn't want to talk through the process. 3 days after the party, I told her about the college arrangement. What I'd set up with her to cover Brooke's tuition, how Brooke hadn't known. Nina listened to all of it. Then, so quietly, just a statement, no blow-up. I'm not doing it anymore. Just a clean, clear line. I couldn't argue with her. I'd watched Nina try for 5 years. I'd watched her get shut out over and over, and she always came back anyway, unprompted, without asking me to intervene. And the expectation was that after standing up at our anniversary party and calling her a downgrade from a dead woman, Nina was supposed to reset to zero and hand over tuition money? No, I wouldn't have asked that of her. I told Brooke about it a few days later. She was upset, and some of it was legitimate. I should have told her earlier that finances were complicated, that Nina was the current plan. That was my fault entirely, and I own it. But most of what Brooke said was built around the assumption that an apology would be enough to reset everything, and she'd still get what she was expecting. That's not how any of this works. Her apology came about 2 days after I told her. I read it carefully. I knew immediately what it was. It wasn't, I said something genuinely awful and I'm ashamed of myself. It was, I understand there are financial consequences and I'd like to limit them. It appeared after her grandfather laid out what was at stake. Nina read it, went quiet for a while, then told me she was done. Not with me, but with the whole project of trying to get Brooke to accept her. She said she'd been giving it everything for 5 years, and she was finished. She wasn't asking me to choose sides, she was just done with that part of it. And she said it without any drama, which somehow made it heavier than if she'd cried. I told her she was right. Nina and I had a real fight about a week after the party. Not about whether she was wrong to pull the funding, she wasn't, and I knew it, but about where I actually stood. Not the version I'd been saying, but the real one. I didn't have a clean answer at first. And she could tell. She pushed on it. She said she'd never truly felt backed up by me when it came to Brooke. For years, she'd told herself it was because I was protecting my relationship with my daughter. But now, she wondered if it was simpler than that, if I'd just been okay with her being treated that way as long as it kept things quiet. She went further. She said she'd spent 5 years trying to build something with Brooke. And every time she hit a wall, she'd checked in with herself. Am I pushing too hard? Am I being too present? Is there something I'm doing that's making this worse? She'd spent years adjusting and recalibrating and trying different approaches, all while I nodded along and told her, she'll come around. And at no point had I turned around and told Brooke the same thing. Not once. It was always Nina who had to adjust. Never Brooke who had to meet anyone halfway. That landed. I didn't get defensive because she wasn't wrong. Inaction is still a choice. I'd been making it over and over while telling myself I wasn't really choosing anything. Every time I didn't step in, every time I let another cold interaction pass without saying something to Brooke about it, I was choosing something. I'd just been comfortable not naming it. We didn't fully resolve the fight that night. We sat on opposite ends of the couch in this quiet that wasn't angry anymore. The kind that comes after the honest thing has been said out loud, and now both people have to figure out what to do with it. I told her I was sorry, specifically. Not generically sorry about how things turned out. Sorry for every specific time I didn't say what I should have said to Brooke. She acknowledged it. Didn't brush it off or dismiss it. She just nodded and said she needed to hear that. Then she told me she was going to stay at her parents' house for a while. Not leaving, just needing some distance. Her parents had been at the party, they'd seen everything, and she wanted to be around people who already understood without her having to re-explain it. I told her I got it. I helped her carry her bag to the car and watched her pull out of the driveway. I went inside and stress-ate half a bag of pretzels standing at the kitchen counter at 11 p.m. It's genuinely the least relevant detail, but also the most honest. The days she was gone were strange. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in a while. Not a bad quiet, just the kind that makes you think too much. I spent the first couple of days catching up on work. Somewhere around day 3, I wrote out a long list of every moment over the past 5 years where I should have said something to Brooke and didn't. I didn't do anything with the list. I just needed to see it in front of me. It was longer than I expected. Nina was at her parents' house for about a week and a half. We talked on the phone every day, sometimes for a long time, sometimes just a few minutes to check in. About 10 days in, I drove over for dinner. It was awkward for the first 20 minutes because her parents had been at the party and weren't sure how to act around me, which I completely understood. Her mom made pasta. We all sat down, and by the time we were halfway through the meal, it was just people talking. Nobody brought up the party directly. It was fine. Better than fine, actually. A few days after that, Nina showed up at the house in the morning before I'd left for work. Just knocked and let herself in with her key. I was standing in the kitchen with my bag on my shoulder about to head out. I called in and took the day off. We spent it just being around each other. Nothing planned, nothing to resolve, just existing in the same space without it being tense. First day like that in almost 3 weeks. We made breakfast, walked around the block, watched part of a movie neither of us could get into. That afternoon, she said something I've been thinking about ever since. She said she wasn't angry at Brooke. She was finished. She wanted me to understand the difference. Not bitterness, not a grudge, just done. Like closing a tab you'd had open too long. She wasn't walking around carrying it. She just quietly decided she was done extending energy in that direction, and she needed me to know it wasn't a threat or an ultimatum. It was just where she'd landed. I told her I understood. And this time, I actually meant it the way she needed me to mean it. We sat on the back porch for a while that afternoon, just not talking, which sounds weird, but was actually the most comfortable either of us had been in weeks. At some point, she fell asleep in the patio chair for like 20 minutes. I let her sleep. Then I told her what had been happening with Brooke, because I'd been keeping most of it from her while she was at her parents'. She hadn't asked, which was its own kind of grace. After Brooke had gone to her grandparents', I'd kept trying to stay in contact. Texts, calls, a few voicemails. She was responding at first, upset, still making her case, still expecting the outcome to be different. Then the responses got shorter, then nothing. I drove out to her grandparents' place once, knocked on the door. Her grandfather answered, told me politely but clearly that Brooke wasn't ready to see me. She didn't come downstairs. He did pass along one thing: her maternal grandparents would cover her college costs. They expected me to pay them back when I was in a position to, and I told him that was fair, and I'd hold myself to it. I meant every word. I was relieved Brooke wasn't going to be left without options. But standing on that porch, being told all of this through her grandfather instead of by her directly, was its own particular kind of hard to sit with. I even tried calling from a different number a couple of times after that. Definitely not something I'm proud of. She didn't pick up. She called me once, about 2.5 weeks after the party. I picked up on the first ring. She talked for most of the call. Said I'd never prioritized her. That I'd always put Nina first. That my willingness to keep working on my marriage with Nina was proof that I'd never really tried with her mom. And that was why that marriage failed. I wanted to respond to all of it. I had a lot to say. But she didn't want a conversation. She wanted to deliver what she'd been building and then be done. She told me she was finished, done talking to me, done with all of it. Then she hung up and blocked me everywhere. That was the last time we spoke. It's been about 6 weeks since that last phone call. Here's where things actually stand. Nina and I are good. Genuinely good. Going through something that rough together. The kind of thing that could have ended it if either one of us had folded at the wrong moment, and coming out on the same side does something to the foundation that you can't get any other way. There's less uncertainty now. We know where we stand in a way that 5 years of smooth sailing alone doesn't produce. My business is picking back up. A couple of bigger contracts came in, and if things hold like they're trending, I should be able to start paying Brooke's grandparents back before the end of the year. I fully intend to. That debt doesn't sit right with me. As for Brooke, I'm still blocked on everything. Her grandparents have passed along a few updates through a mutual family contact. She's settled in at school, doing okay from what they can tell. I'm glad for that. I'm not sitting around hoping she's struggling somewhere. I'm not building a case against her in my head. She's my daughter, and I love her. She made a choice to go no contact, and I'm not going to chase a closed door. Here's the part I've had to really sit with. I don't fully blame Brooke for who she became in this. She lost her mom at 15, out of nowhere, no warning. That's a wound that doesn't have a clean timeline. Some of her coldness toward Nina over the years, some of the resentment, that was real grief, not just entitlement. I let that belief keep me passive for way too long. I should have had hard conversations with her years ago. Should have made it clear that Nina wasn't a target for that pain. I didn't do that. That's on me. I've also had to sit with the version of events where I imagine telling 15-year-old Brooke, fresh off losing her mom, that she needed to treat her dad's new girlfriend better. And I understand why I didn't do it then. But 15 eventually became 16, then 17, then 18. At some point, the grief excuse stopped covering the whole behavior. I kept applying it anyway because it was easier than the alternative. But the speech at the party wasn't grief spilling over in an uncontrolled moment. She looked directly at Nina when she delivered it. She chose every single word. And expecting my wife to absorb all of that and still cover college costs like nothing happened? That expectation revealed something deep about what Brooke thought she was owed from the people around her, regardless of how she treated them. Like, certain people were just obligated to keep showing up for her no matter what. I'm not bitter about it. I'm just clear-eyed in a way I maybe wasn't before all of this. There's something clarifying about going through a situation where you can't be neutral anymore, where every choice you make is visible and counts. I'd been operating in the fog of, maybe it'll work out, for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just make a call and own it. The door on my end is still open if she ever decides to walk through it. That's not going to change. I'm her dad, and that doesn't have an off switch. But I'm not standing in the hallway waiting either. Nina's here. We're fine. And the thing I kept half protecting for 5 years, without fully committing to it, I committed to it when it actually counted. Better late, I guess. Honestly, this whole thing has been a wild ride. What would you have done in my position? Have you ever had to draw a line like this with someone you love, even if it meant a painful outcome? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts.